Hello everyone and welcome back. Sometimes the most important part of a story is the thing that isn't there. Interpreting absence can be really tricky, especially in exhibitions, because one thing is researching and interpreting something that isn't there anymore. Another thing is displaying it and communicating it and give visitors a sense of this missing thing. Now, in exhibition interpretation, there are a number of techniques you can use for interpreting absence. However, a lot of them also come with their own challenges and pitfalls to avoid. So I thought we should dive into a list of techniques for how to interpreting absence and also discuss some of the things that we need to be careful about when we are using these. Some of them can be really powerful and sometimes tell a story in their own right. And as always, please add your own examples below, your comments, your thoughts around this. If you have any great examples for how absence has been used in exhibitions, please do share them. It would be wonderful. And also remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. So let's dive into these. I think the first one here we probably all know or have seen before, the witness marks. So this can be a physical evidence of an object or a place that existed. It can be holes, sun fade, scorch, a wear. Archaeologists know all about these. It can be nail holes, a clean rectangle where a plaque hung, a sun-faded wall with a bright silhouette. It can be a burn mark on a ledger shelf, empty mound beside it, that kind of thing. You can use some visitor prompts here. You can, for example, say, point to one trace that proves something once stood here. Now, the thing to avoid here is don't be vague. Name the mechanisms. Like, for example, removed in 1943 or fire damage in 1979 or something. One good trace beats a wall of random scuffs. And that's the important thing to remember when using this technique. It can be very, very powerful and it can really give a sense of space. But it has to be used with great care and you have to be really, really precise about what you're doing with this. Another one is the ghost objects, where you show the shape, not the replica of something. So this can be, for example, a silhouette or a projection where an object was. Now you have to keep the monochrome so the gap is felt and not faked. So for example, you can have 50% grey vinyl outline of a missing painting in its original frame, for example. You can have light projection of a ledger footprint on a shelf with only the clasp remaining or something. A visitor prompt that's quite nice to use is stand where the outline is and tell us what the detail around you feels different. That can be a very good way of actually prompting a sensory feeling in visitors. A pitfall to avoid around this one is avoid color or texture that reads as a substitute. Add a precise caption, like an inventory number or the last sighting of this, but try not to make it look as though you are trying to replicate the missing object. The void case. Now, this is a peculiar one because no one really wants to leave empty spaces in an exhibition. We really want to fill everything when we have an exhibition space, but the empty space can actually do a lot of talking. This is a deliberate empty case with one plain card, for example, that explains the absence. It can be an empty mount and a label, removed under occupation 1943, not returned, something like that. It can be a case marking a community object on loan to its owners, for example. You can use visitor prompts here, like what single record would you most want to see for this missing item and why? So let visitors in on why there is an empty case here. A pitfall to avoid, very important. Only use this once in a while. You can only really use once per gallery. That can be powerful, but you really don't want to overdo this because then it just becomes really boring. So have one in a gallery and then no more. The footprint line, where you draw the parameter of what's gone, is a great one as well. You can have a floor outline of a demolished room or a structure that's removed. You can also do this outdoors, by the way, if you have like a large building structure or something. What you do is you can literally tape showing where something was and the size of something. It can be a building baseline of a house that's no longer there, for example. Now, a visitor prompt can be step inside the outline. What changes in your sense of scale? So this is really where you play with scale. And that can be very powerful for visitors, because you actually get to feel the scale of something. That's much more powerful than just to say this house was so and so many meters long and so many meters high or whatever. So let visitors feel the scale. Now, a pitfall to avoid is keep labels minimal, because too much text kills the spatial effects. So you really want to ensure accessibility. So the contrast and really keep the explanations to this minimal. The timeline lacuna, where you leave the gap visible. This is a purposeful break in a timeline where records were erased or suppressed. So examples can be, typical of wartime, 1939 to 45 gap with a thin red bar labeled records removed or something like that. A visitor prompt can be, which source would you trust to fill this gap, and what would you still doubt? That's a wonderful way of actually letting visitors in on some of the complexities around, especially wartime objects that have gone missing or have been replaced, for example. Now, the thing about this kind of tactic is don't leave it unexplained. State the cause and what evidence you do have available. So be very, very clear about what you have available and what you don't have available here. So don't leave a gap unexplained when you use this technique. The absence map is wonderful. A map is always great. Plot what is missing, not just what's present. So use map pins, for example, to mark disappeared items or structures or people, a symbol for known dots versus uncertainty. This can be like a city plan with voids where buildings stood, buildings perhaps that were destroyed or removed or something. It can be collection map showing objects repatriated versus still pending. A visitor prompt can be, which absence should we investigate next? Place a sticker. That way you actively get a visitor involved. Now, a pitfall to avoid is avoid clustering that implies blame without evidence. This is very important. Avoid placing blame when you use this one. So keep the categories tight and sourced all the way through. Sound is just always wonderful to use in exhibitions, I think. The sound of absence. So use silence as content. Silence is very powerful. I think anyone who's into music knows that the silence in music can be just as powerful as the actual notes. So this is a short moment of intentional silence or a low room tone, for example, in place of narration. So examples can be one bell strike of silence on the hour for a lost ship's bell, for example, a 5-second mute when visitors reach the empty frame. A prompt you can use is, after the silence, what's the first detail you notice? This is again a sensory beat you're trying to evoke here. A pitfall to avoid is use this once, because repetition tends to dull the impact. So only use this once in a while, because if you overuse silence, it's just gonna be boring and visitors start to not notice it. But if a silence is placed in a room where there is normally sound or narration, it can be very, very powerful. Now, what's always really fun to do when using or interpreting absence is to just try it out and see what works best, because a lot of this also has to do with what works in a space, what works in a room, and that can be very difficult to say in advance. You really need to know your exhibition spaces, where visitors linger, what is powerful here, what is your centerpieces, where do you want to draw attention to when you're using these techniques. But the best thing to do is really just to try them out and see what works here. Absence is a tricky and peculiar thing to work with in interpretation, but I think it's important to remember that absence isn't empty. Absence is evidence. You had something once that has now disappeared, or you know about something that once existed and now it's not here anymore for whatever reason. And being very clear about that is usually something that visitors are actually drawn to, because visitors know perfectly well that we don't know everything about history. There are gaps in history. We don't have all the pieces in the puzzle here. And that is very often what creates a fascination and what can be used very actively in interpretation to draw people in. Thanks for tuning in, and let me know of your best examples of how to interpreting absence.